I've always wanted to say DJ Khaled, "We the Best," like coming out of that music.
DJ Khaled, we the best music
For real. But skeet. But it's the AFC South preview. It's the most popular division in the NFL.
Yes, we're gonna have so much fun tonight talking about some of the most riveting divisional races.
It actually is pretty interesting.
It actually should be pretty good. And actually the other division we're talking about should have some interest to it too. So
I think in terms of the NFC South, we'll do that episode after this one.
yes.
But the AFC South, I think, has a lot of kind of interesting storylines. You know, last year you had CJ Stroud and the Texans being this kind of out of nowhere team that I think they were probably projected as like what, a 4 or 5 win team last year.
Yeah.
They come out, they win 10 games, they win a playoff game. And I think they even played the Ravens decently for a half.
Yeah, the first half it was back and forth before the Ravens flexed the muscle on them.
Yes, and then now they have the superstar quarterback. Everybody loves the Texans as like a possible AFC contender. I don't know if I go that far yet with them.
Yeah,
but Jacksonville's, you know, they were 8-3 at one point and then collapsed down the stretch. Like they should be back in the mix for this, you would think. Indianapolis like was right there to win the division last year.
Yeah.
With Gardner Minshew. They didn't even have their starting quarterback for most of the season. And then Tennessee, like as kind of dysfunctional as they were with Vrabel leaving at the end of the season, and we might disagree with that move, you know, Will Levis did show some signs of capability. So this overall is a division, I think, that to me is pretty interesting. We'll start with the Texans. You know, last year came out of nowhere, right? With Stroud under center. I think especially in the second half of the season, he was one of the top 10 quarterbacks, and I would even say top 5 quarterbacks in terms of like EPA, PFF grade. Like he was really that good.
Yeah.
And I think even though Puka Nacua had a record-setting rookie season, I think CJ Stroud still deserved Offensive Rookie of the Year. You know, head coach D'Amico Ryans comes from San Francisco, immediately puts together one of the best units on that side of the ball. But I think offensively is like kind of where we'll start with this team. With the Texans, I think like Stroud had that rookie season, right?
Yep.
That they win 10 games and everybody's excited. Like, do you see them making that next step to AFC contender, Super Bowl contender in year 2 of Stroud and D'Amico Ryans in Houston?
Well, they should. You would think that is the next drop for them. They do have a very difficult schedule. It's going to be a great schedule in terms of entertainment purposes. They have a lot of fun games that the national audience is going to be tuning into. They made some nice additions to their defense, and of course, they brought in the much. How would you describe Stephon Diggs?
Malcontent, but he's talented.
Yes, very talented. And they have a great head coach, and they were able to keep Bobby Slowick too, which is another thing that I think a lot of people might overlook with the Texans. Yeah. So it's they're going to be an interesting team to follow. They should very well. I still think even with their tough schedule, I think they're still going to be the best team in the AFC South.
I agree solely because I think the quarterback is for real. Yeah. I was not the biggest Stroud fan coming out.
Nor was I.
I guess I look really wrong for that. But you can't deny how good he was as a rookie. I mentioned he was basically like top 5 and not just rookie quarterback. I'm talking like all quarterbacks throughout the league. Yeah. 30 yards per attempt, 4th in EPA, 5th in money throws per player profiler, highest rookie PFF grade since Russell Wilson in 2012. Which I think that's if you're looking for an outcome as a Texans fan that you're hoping for, is you're hoping for that 2012 to 2013 Seahawks type of run where like doing a little history lesson. We are the Old Souls podcast or football podcast. So in 2012, like Russell Wilson has this historically good rookie season. Like I said, like one of the highest graded passing seasons of any rookie in NFL history. Like right up there with like Brock Purdy, like better than Brock Purdy. A lot of people think like those Seahawks teams that were like Super Bowl contenders in the early 2010s were just defensive driven, but Wilson was really that good. But going to the Texans, that's I think what makes them a contender. It's like they have a good team. You know, Tank Della's outside. You've got Nico Collins finally stepped up into what looks like a star receiver. You mentioned Diggs. Up front, they're pretty solid with Laramie Tunzel, Titus Howard. They hopefully will get him playing better at right tackle. That the only thing on offense I would say that is their offensive line, but their weapons are so good. Dalton Schultz being your number 4 option is pretty, or even you could even say maybe number 5 behind Joe Mixon. This team is so talented offensively, and they have a good defensive head coach with good defensive talent, with guys like Will Anderson and D'Amico Ryans running the ship. Like I think this team, I look on paper, I think this team's every bit as good as like Cincinnati. I don't see a huge difference between a team like Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and their weapons. They have questions up front going back to ever since I've been following the Bengals. They're like that. They don't have good offensive lines generally. But this Houston team, I think, is for real. I think they're the type of team that could win the AFC.
Yeah.
I think I'm buying into this team. I think they should be the heavy favorites to win this division. And what's so promising to me is if you look at the second half of the season in Houston in 2023, you saw a team that got better and better as the season went on. I like those type of teams transitioning into the second or going into the next season. So if you look from week 9 on, they won 7 games and lost 3. So they went 7-3 down the stretch with a rookie quarterback, and then they won a playoff game. So really, they finished the season 8-4.
Yeah,
postseason. I think this team, like if you were to handicap them, I think the only teams that in the AFC, I think I would put over them at this point, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, maybe. Buffalo's got questions. Miami, we just talked about them.
Like, yeah.
Houston's proven more than Miami.
They've won a playoff game in recent times.
Moore, of course, is right there. But Baltimore is kind of depending on they're depending on Lamar Jackson staying healthy for 2 straight seasons, which really just hasn't happened yet. So this team, I think they're legit. I really like the way they're built. And it's hilarious because 2 years ago, what were we saying about the Texans?
Oh, they're a dumpster fire. Remember when they gifted the Bears the first pick of the draft by Lovie Smith when balls out towards the end of the week 18 game in Indianapolis, and we were all like, oh my God, they ruined their chance at getting Bryce Young.
Yeah, he was basically the hero.
Yeah.
For the Bears, because the Bears ended up being able to trade that number 1 pick, which netted them DJ Moore. What was it? A number 1 this year, which was Caleb Williams.
Yep.
A number 2, I think. So it's which they turned into who did that 2 turn into?
Stevenson.
Sweat, right?
Sorry?
Was it Montez Sweat that they got?
No, it was the pick they got from Carolina. That was the pick they got from trading Christian McCaffrey, and the Bears used it to pick Tyreek Stevenson.
Yeah. So I think
still have another second round pick next year.
But it goes to show you though that the teams that struggle, so like the teams that struggled really badly, if they get the quarterback and the head coach right, like Houston did last year, it transforms everything. Like we saw Nico Collins go from like a complete afterthought to one of the best receivers in all of pro football last season in terms of like productivity. This is now like the cool team that superstar players want to go play for. Like look at Mixon and Diggs. I mean, I think this team. The only question I have is offensive line. Not a huge fan. The only guy that I really like is Tunzel. And he's not even like a top 10 left tackle. It's kind of like a Band-Aid type thing, but I think they might be able to kind of make do with what they have. And Stroud navigates the pocket really well.
Yeah, I was gonna say Stroud also he did
He
well
avoids
with that.
sacks.
He gets the ball out early, avoids sacks. That's what you want your quarterback to do.
And this is like high praise, like the highest praise I can think of for a quarterback that's like this young. But like when I think of how I would want a quarterback to play and like how I want my franchise quarterback to play, like Stroud did it last year. Like cuz
Yeah.
he avoids sacks, he has some ability but he doesn't like rely on it as like a crutch to be productive. He's accurate. He plays with good timing. And then like there's the intangibles. Like he comes off as a winner, he comes off as a leader. I think like I feel bad for Carolina fans, and we'll talk later about them tonight. But yeah, I don't think there's too much to talk about with this Texans team. I think that they're in a really good spot going into the season. What do you any other thoughts on Houston before we go to the next team?
No, I don't. I do really like where they're heading, and it's going to be a fun year following them. I like obviously the Deshaun Watson thing that was held so, that's going back a few years, but that left everybody with a bad taste in their mouth regarding that franchise. But before then, and even when you go back 10 years, like when you had Andre Johnson and Arian Foster and JJ Watt, like that city, when the Texans are good, that's such a great football city. And they deserve to have a good football team, and they're going to have one this year.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm buying in heavily to the Texans. I'm a believer. Like outside, like I said, the only unit I really don't love because on the defensive side of the ball, with D'Amico Ryans, I kind of just trust it to work. And they have talent. Like Will Anderson showed up and delivered what we would think a third overall pick would deliver as a rookie.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot to like. They were always built better defensively. It's offense and really poor quarterback play that, from 2021 to 22, those 2 years, Davis Mills was awful, like really bad.
yeah.
And last year showed like what happens when you put a guy like Stroud in. And the other, I guess the last thing on the Texans that'll be interesting to kind of see is if Bobby Slowick, if they put together another big year offensively where guys like Nico Collins deliver a top 5 yards per route run like they did last year. If they continue to produce, like Slowick's going to be, I would assume, like one of the top guys available for head coaching position. So I think teams like maybe the next one might be looking at possibly going to somebody like Bobby Slowick if things don't work out. And that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. This team completely screwed it up last year. They had the division wrapped up. Like, if you go back to, I guess it was late November, early December, this team had the AFC South in a chokehold. They were 8-3. I mentioned the Texans kind of started the season like they weren't that great, right? They were like a sub 500 team, like 4-5, right? And then they got hot down the stretch, right? I mentioned this Jacksonville team started 8-3. Their final season record, end of the season record, 9-8. So they go basically 1-5 down the stretch.
It was similar to like Dallas and Philadelphia in the NFC East.
Yeah, I think there was a little more excuses. I think there's a little more justifiable excuse for Jacksonville than those other teams. because I think Lawrence getting hurt. If Lawrence doesn't get hurt in that Cincinnati game, they probably win that game. They don't lose to Jake Browning on Monday night. So they probably get to 9 wins right there. They'll get 10 against Carolina. They make the playoffs, and everybody forgets the whole collapse down the stretch.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, like, Lawrence was clearly playing hurt. And that's where I think the entire season is really about Trevor Lawrence. I have seen so much. I hate saying this word because I think it's overused, but it's disrespect. Like, I think no one thinks that this guy's good. Like, they all laughed when he got his extension, that where what was his extension, like $200-300 million?
Yeah.
And everybody laughed, right? It was ridiculous that Trevor Lawrence would get $250 million. But if you look at his numbers, like prior to the injury, like, he was one of the better quarterbacks in all of football. And then it just kind of fell apart. And I don't think this, like, offense did any favors. Go back and watch Jacksonville's games against really good teams, especially like the Chiefs game. I can't tell you how many times I counted Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones getting 1 foot in bounds or just coming up short, making a contested catch in the end zone. I want to say, realistically, I counted like 8 touchdowns that were right there.
Yes.
And you think about, and like, let's just say 50% of them actually turn into touchdowns.
28 Trevor points Lawrence is a lot to add to your season.
He becomes a 30 touchdown thrower. Like, what are we even talking about? Yeah. Like, I think Lawrence has mobility. I think he's done more with less than a lot of other quarterbacks. I think people don't understand what they have. And I'm putting my nuts on the table on this one. But, like, I think that Trevor Lawrence is having the career arc that Peyton Manning had when he was with the Colts. Yeah. And everybody goes, whoa, you can't compare Peyton Manning and Trevor Lawrence. And I'm like, yes, you can, because as a prospect, Trevor Lawrence was probably that level of prospect coming out of Clemson. Like, basically came in as a freshman, was the best quarterback in college football from the get-go. Won a national title as a true freshman quarterback, which, think about that for a second. That's insane. I don't care where you do it, whether you're at Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, doesn't matter. If you're doing it at that level, and I think, like, in that national championship game, they had like 40+ points scored on Alabama's defense. Like, he was doing it against the best competition at like 18 years old, and has the college career that he did. And then Peyton Manning, like, first, I guess it was really 98, 99, 2000, and like 99, he made the playoffs, but they lost. Yeah. They went 1 and done. 2000,
made the playoffs.
They made the playoffs, but they lost. 2001, they go like 6-10. 2002, they get knocked out. So, like, he didn't win a playoff game. We talked about this until year 6. And I think Trevor Lawrence, everybody's giving up way too quickly. And to me, he has shown a lot already to make me believe in him. Now, is he going to be as good as Peyton Manning was from like the 2003 season to 2010? Not ready to say that.
Yeah. But
he absolutely could be a top 10 quarterback in the league and is certainly deserving
for a long time.
If you're a fan of the Giants, what would you give up for Trevor Lawrence?
Oh, they'd move heaven and earth.
Then exactly. So if you're a Giants fan laughing at the Jags for signing Trevor Lawrence to an extension, shut the hell up. You don't know what you're talking about, because most teams that don't have a quarterback right now would love to extend this guy.
Yeah.
And Jacksonville, for a team that doesn't do the right thing, managed to do the right thing. But any thoughts on the actual team itself kind of going into the season?
No, I guess my thoughts always still, like yourself, circle around Trevor Lawrence. And a lot of people point to Trevor Lawrence. Like, I remember when when the Bears were going through the whole process of, eventually moving on from Justin Fields, it hadn't been official yet, but people were saying, okay, this is going to be probably the eventual outcome. And a lot of the Justin Fields backers were like, well, look at Trevor Lawrence. Like, Caleb Williams is getting compared to him like as like a same kind of generational prospect. And he hasn't, and as we said, or as you said earlier, he's done so much with so little. That offensive line that they had. Now they did add Mitch Morse this year, which if he has, we'll see how much he has left in the tank. But he had a long career in Buffalo. A good career, but a long career.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years he's really going to be able to contribute. But Trevor Lawrence is so good at getting the ball out so quickly, but he was under pressure a lot. I mean, he was really under pressure a lot.
And the type of offense they run is like there's so much downfield, and like I thought Calvin Ridley never made sense for that team either.
No.
Like Calvin Ridley is not,
and actually getting Gabe Davis then, like when they hadn't addressed their offensive line, didn't make. Now eventually they did address their offensive line, but when they got Gabe Davis, it was like, okay, is Trevor going to get the time to throw to him?
I agreed with the Gabe Davis, and like in hindsight, I like the Brian Thomas pick because what really their offense like, and this is a fantasy football take right here. So like if you're drafting Jaguars, like don't draft Brian Thomas or Gabe Davis, right? Because they're going to be like your vertical X type of players. Like they're stretching the field. They're literally making teams play shell coverage. That I think what is going to end up happening is like Trevor Lawrence's job will become a lot easier because like that's going to be, I think what ends up happening are players like Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk are going to be able to do so much more in the middle part of the field and the intermediate part of the field, where I bet you're going to see Trevor Lawrence's like average depth of target go probably down this season, but there's going to be like a higher third down percentage. The Jags will sustain more drives. This team was also really poor in the kicking game. And that makes a difference in the NFL. Like people don't like to talk about it, but like we talked about it a little bit with the Patriots, but like you lose close games and you're missing 10, 20% more of your field goals. Like your margin for error goes way down, but you lose a possession. But it also, like, think about it this way. It's like, if you're not good for, like, the Ravens get to the 40-yard line, they know that that possession's coming away with points, right?
Yeah.
Because Justin Tucker's such an automatic guy from like 55 and in. Well, Jacksonville has to get like an extra first down to feel comfortable, like the Ravens do. So like that margin for error is razor thin and like, to me, that's what Jacksonville, like watching them play. It's like Trevor Lawrence is throwing dimes and they weren't getting caught. Like to me, the whole thing is he's been okay, right? He's been a decent quarterback. He hasn't been great, but they've asked him to do so many things. Like, to me, like, just make his job a little bit easier and you're going to get like top 5, top 10 production out of the position. Going to the defensive side of the ball, I mean, I didn't love their draft because like Mason Smith, I don't think a lot of people did because he's from LSU and like that was such a Trent Baalke pick. Like, hey, if you're injured but super athletic and come from an SEC school, Trent Baalke's going to draft you.
Yeah, I'll go with it.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I like Josh Allen in that front. I think they have talent.
Allen.
Oh yeah, he changed his name. That's right.
Today.
But I think people are very quick to dismiss Jacksonville, and I think if certain things kind of go better for them, I think this team's actually due for maybe some positive regression, if anything. This feels like a wild card team to me. The only reason I don't think they win the division is because I think Houston is actually just a better team than they are.
Yeah,
and they proved it last year. But I like Jacksonville like to be a wild card team. Any more thoughts on Jacksonville?
No, not really. We'll see in regards to the defense. We'll see what Eric Armstead does to help bring up that pass rush that was non-existent. Trayvon Walker is looking like a real bad pick right now.
That's another balky pick where he took the traits. He took all the traits. It's like, dude, just take the guy you know is going to produce. Like Aiden Hutchinson might not be like, I mean, he's really good. He went second overall, so let's not pretend like he didn't have great traits. But
right,
like sometimes you don't have to make it hard. Is all we're saying.
And even like, you get. I know the Bears had the first pick 2 years in a row, but one of the years they did trade it because they wanted to see what they had in Fields again, and it gave them a little bit more ammo for a better quarterback draft. For the opportunity to possibly land Caleb Williams or I can't think of his name now, or Jaden Daniels, guys like that. But like that, when you land the first pick 2 years in a row, like you got Josh Allen already, you got your quarterback. Like, don't go for the traits guy with the second time around. Like that might be a time where you're like, maybe we'll trade back now. Maybe this is the pick we use to trade back and build up more. Like maybe we find a guy that we like with traits, but maybe we pick him at 8 or 9, or we pick him at 6.
And you don't know though if somebody like if there was a market to trade.
Yeah,
back.
That's true. Yeah, but teams loved Aiden Hutchinson too. So like if somebody thought that the line, because everybody was talking about Aiden Hutchinson going to the Lions from the point that Lions team was going downhill in 2021. Or not, they started the year bad because he was the Michigan guy. It was like, oh, we're going to keep him in state. So maybe a team loved Aiden Hutchinson and they wanted to jump the lines to get him. So,
and in hindsight, the first pick of that draft should have been Sauce Gardner. But
yes,
I think sometimes
maybe they would have gotten Sauce Gardner if they traded back.
Yeah, they probably could have. Maybe the Jets would have moved up for Trayvon Walker, and it would have been really fun. So,
the Jets are too bad. Joe Douglas is like, well, all right, I guess I'll go after Trayvon Walker.
you can't do these in the new Madden games, but like what I used to do, like on the old Xbox 360, and like the original Xbox, like when I had Madden, was you could control every team.
Oh yeah, so you just accept every trade
in franchise mode. So like what I would do is like the really stupid decisions, like I did, like Oakland, always do it. Like in the draft, always the fastest guy, like going to Oakland first round. And then Jacksonville was the team that would sign like the biggest, most expensive free agent. So like Albert Hainsworth in a fictional world was a Jacksonville Jaguar through and through. Like always made, and like what was funny is I remember when Hainsworth like signed with the Redskins, like I looked at him like, yeah, I mean that's on brand, like that's what we would think, like that's where he would go, and then it turned into a bust. We're like, yeah, makes. You remember when Albert Hainsworth couldn't like pass his physical, and then Mike Golick went out and did the like conditioning test.
I don't remember that, but I do remember him laying on his belly on Monday Night Football.
Yeah. So the summer, Hainsworth signs with the Redskins that March. So like it's July, and like the big news of the summer, and this is like when it's still slow at training camp, is like they haven't started practicing yet, but news out of Washington or Landover is Albert Hainsworth hasn't passed his physical yet. Or like hasn't passed his conditioning test. And like for defensive tackles, it's basically like run up and down the field like 2 times.
Yeah, and don't throw up.
And so like Mike Golick, I think like on NFL Live, and this was back when like I think this was right as he was doing like the Nutrisystem thing, where so Mike Golick was still fat. He does the conditioning test, and it's like you have a dude that's been out of football for like 15 years.
Yeah.
That like is known for just eating donuts on ESPN
and cheeseburgers.
Yeah. And he just did it. And Dan Snyder is the one that here's $100 million. It's like, and I looked at my dad, it's like, you should have let me play football because damn it, like I could have just been a fatty and like gotten $100 million. Like, because that's how it works, right? But yeah. Anyway, Going to the next team is the Indianapolis Colts. I think this team's intriguing because, and just, I guess, stop me if you haven't heard this before, but this is a really well-built team by Chris Ballard.
Yeah.
But they haven't
figure out the quarterback position, and maybe he did, but if he could, for sure, he'd have won a lot of Super Bowls by this point.
They haven't won the division since 2014.
Has it been that long?
Yeah. So Deflategate was the last division championship that the Colts have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Because they went like 7-9 with Andrew Luck like a few years in a row.
And then he was hurt. And then in 2018 with Frank Reich, they did they got the wild card, but they didn't win the division because I think the Texans won.
Yeah, they started like 1-5, I think, that year.
Yeah. And I think they beat the Texans in the wild card round. That was Andrew Luck's last playoff win. And then they lost to the Chiefs, and then he retired. But like, that's my only thing about the Colts is like, roster's pretty good. Like, they got talent all over. Like, I do like the way they play defense. It's a very simplistic approach. They run the Gus Bradley system essentially. And Gus Bradley's their defensive coordinator. Like, exactly what he's going to run. He hasn't really changed up his scheme since he was with Seattle. I think the thing, like, they have weapons that are capable. Jonathan Taylor's really good at running back. They still have, I think, one of the better O-lines in the sport. What has killed them is the quarterback position. And last year they got a capable backup play from Gardner Minshew, and that kept them in contention for the AFC South. They lost the final week of the season to the Texans and lost the division. Minshew went to Vegas, and first round pick of 2023, Anthony Richardson will reclaim the starting position. He did start the season and showed flashes. And this is where I'm going to pause on the hype for the Colts.
Yeah.
I think Anthony Richardson screams like he's the next Justin Fields to me.
Yeah.
I don't think this guy can play quarterback. And clip this. I'm sure all the 5 people that see this.
Yeah. If we reach the Indianapolis fans, man, I hope they come at us hard and give us the views.
I hope I'm wrong, because when Anthony Richardson played well at Florida, he was awesome. Like that Utah game where he he's fun as hell to watch. Justin Fields was like this. Like when he made big plays, it was special. But he's so inconsistent. I still don't know whether he can actually read defenses and play well in timing. He was not very accurate as a rookie. He did all the things I expected him to do well last season.
Yeah.
But he did all the things poorly I thought he would do poorly. I didn't learn anything new about him last year, and we didn't get a big sample size. But I think a lot of people are just like penciling in, oh, he's going to be a pretty good quarterback for them. And I'm like, I don't know if he's going to be better than Gardner Minshew was. And I actually think this passing offense might take a step back. And when a passing offense takes a step back, I don't know about this team. And I know this is frustrating if you're a Colts fan to hear this. Like, I think this team is like destined for another like 7 to 9 wins. Like that's this team.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same way. Me and Steven, every year we get our Lindy's Sportsbook NFL preview magazine. And I was reading through the Colts preview the other day, and they kept saying the word flashes. He's shown flashes. And every time I read that, they must have, in the little clip about him, like in the depth chart, and the write-up about him, like under the quarterbacks thing, and then in the beginning, like intro to the Colts, the word flashes, I think, came up in every single one of those regarding Anthony Richardson. And every time I said that, I was like, Yeah, but are we sure? Like, are we sure we saw a flash? Like, because we saw flashes, as you said, with Justin Fields, and never. And
I was never a Justin Fields guy. Like, I remember when people would try to tell, oh, he's really good. And I'm like, yeah, when he has an 80-yard touchdown, he can put together a big game. But like, you can't rely on that. That's not consistent play.
Yeah.
I ultimately judge a quarterback. Can he sustain a drive? Like, that's how you win against good teams. Good teams don't give up 80-yard touchdowns.
And as somebody that, as a Bears fan that lived through the Justin Fields stuff, I think there's part of me that's kind of like, all right, but a lot of you came at harder at Justin Fields for the, and deservedly so. Now in hindsight, deservedly so. But now at Anthony Richardson, it's like, you guys don't see you're doing the same thing again.
Yeah.
But now you're all piping them up, like, you know. And I love, as you said, out of Florida, I love. And now I do have to walk this back. Like,
his highlight reel's awesome.
His highlight reel is great. I've always loved the big bodied, strong armed quarterback. And when the Fields experiment died, it made me realize, okay, well, there's a whole lot more to the position than just being a sturdy. And he's not sturdy. We don't know if he's going to be sturdy. He might get injured by week 3.
And the other thing is, like, he had a shoulder injury last year, and that's what derailed Cam Newton's career. Like, everybody wants to compare this guy to Cam. First of all, like, when people compare a big mobile quarterback, like, really what you want is Josh Allen. But that's like a unicorn. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
like,
they're the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. But like, Cam Newton's one that everybody wants to compare him to. You have Jalen Hurts. I think that's the more common one that people want to use because of Shane Steichen, because Jalen Hurts kind of came up under Shane Steichen and like had his breakout year when Steichen was the offensive coordinator in Philly. And I'll say this. Do I think Anthony Richardson, like, is it in his range of outcomes where he like just everything clicks and he has a huge season and he's really good? Absolutely. I don't want to say it's impossible. But when people bring up Cam Newton and Jalen Hurts and these other examples, Josh Allen, like I said, Josh Allen's a unicorn. Like, I would still.
Did his internet cut out again? I think it did.
Sometimes I even for a second. Am I back? I think
You're back. Yes.
Yeah. I just saw my it just started spinning. I don't know why it does that.
I actually kind of love when it happens because it gets so quiet in here, and I just said, did his internet cut out again?
I need to run fiber up here is what I need to do. But I don't have, if somebody wants to sponsor our show, then we can do that. But anyway, but my point is, it's like Josh Allen's a unicorn. We don't see that often. Jalen Hurts, Cam Newton are like the main, I think, comps that everybody like that I see tries to compare him to. Because neither one of them like are the most accurate quarterbacks. But like what I'll argue for those two is like those guys had the college production. Like Cam Newton won the Heisman at Auburn and was the best player in college football by a mile when he was there. Jalen Hurts was actually productive at Alabama and Oklahoma and ran the Lincoln Riley offense. So like he could play in multiple systems and succeed. Like we've seen him do it in the past game. But he's obviously special in the run game. No one's doubting that Richardson has like every tool to be great.
Yeah.
But I think Justin Fields has every tool, but it never came together because there's nuance to playing the position. And we haven't seen him do it yet. And I think too many people are just assuming that that's going to happen. Can it happen? Absolutely. I'm not here to say it won't, but we're in the business of trying to predict what will happen. I think it's more likely that you're going to have a lot of frustrating sequences with this Colts team then you will. I don't think they'll be as bad as the Bears were under Justin Fields. I think this team is a lot better than those Bears teams from 2 years ago. But I don't know. I don't feel. I think people are kind of overrating them.
Yeah.
But I think for the Colts, like I said, I would put them between 7 to 10 wins. It's a talented team, but the quarterback's a question, and we have been saying this about the Colts since Andrew Luck retired.
Yeah.
So, and then the last team of the AFC South, we have the Tennessee Titans, and they finished last season. Brian Callahan comes in from Tennessee, and the reason I think they made that change, so they fired Mike Vrabel, hired Brian Callahan. I think they did it for one reason and one reason only. I think this front office and this ownership group, they believe in Will Levis. Do you, Neil? Do you believe in Will Levis?
Really, outside of he's similar to Anthony Richardson, a fun quarterback, big arm. But outside of his debut, which sometimes it happens that a rookie catches a team off guard like that especially when you don't have film on them.
Yeah.
Some things just don't translate well after that once teams do get film on you. It kind of came downhill for him. Now, I know they had the fun victory late comeback over Miami on Monday Night Football. That was an exciting, and they stopped
his first game was also electric. When his first start, I think against Atlanta, he threw 4 touchdowns. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great game for him. But and just in terms of doing the other little things that you need to do he's also very inaccurate. He took a good bit of sacks. Now, their offensive line was terrible too.
Yeah.
I am, and like yourself, I was always a fan of Vrabel, and I don't think Tennessee ever was. Well, once Ron Carthon took over, he certainly wasn't. He made him fire. Whenever a coach has to fire their entire offense or their entire staff, it's usually not good for what comes after that, unless something big happens in between then that gives them another second punch. But I don't think the Titans are going to be very good at all this year.
I think this whole thing
going to be a bottom threshold of the league sort of a thing.
This whole thing fell apart the moment they traded AJ Brown. You could tell. I think that was the moment.
Winner, and he was the biggest part. I mean, you talk about Derrick Henry. AJ Brown was the biggest part of their offense because he was the field enough for Derrick Henry to run.
Yeah, and I think he was able to make a really non-existent passing game exist enough.
Yeah, look competent.
Yeah, because he and we see it with Philly now. The guy can be a yards after catch or a deep A dot player. I would put AJ Brown right up there as with Tyreek Hill in terms of what the value he brings to an offense. And they let that go for nothing.
Yeah.
And they did that they replaced him with Treylon Burks, who's been super disappointed. I like Treylon Burks coming out of college, but I don't think he was a pound for pound replacement for AJ Brown. Yeah. I think that was a little extreme. I think everybody saw what the Vikings did with Justin Jefferson replacing Stephon Diggs in the 2020 draft when they traded. That was actually that was Buffalo's pick. I'm like, that doesn't happen. That. I think that moment in that NFL draft in 2022, ever since then, I think the relationship between the front office, and that was actually the previous front office. That was I'm blanking on the guy's name now. Damn, I can't. But it was the previous GM. But he's the one that traded AJ Brown. Yeah. But it's I think that, and but I think a big reason was the Adams probably didn't want to pay AJ Brown is probably one of the big things. And I think that soured the relationship between ownership, Vrabel, and then Carthon probably wanted his guy and somebody to believe in his guy because he put his, what on the table and said, this is our guy and he's going to go down with Will Levis. And they brought in a coach. I think that if you're going to succeed with a young quarterback that has a lot of tools, at least build an offensive line around him and get him weapons. And that's what the Titans have done. But I agree with you. I'm not a big believer in Levis. I never saw it at Kentucky. I never saw the appeal. I never thought he was all that accurate. I think he had a big arm, but a lot of guys have big arms. I think accuracy is the most important characteristic of a starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he has that. I think he shows signs of big ability. So I'll kind of lump the Titans in with the Colts at the quarterback position because I think Levis, there's an outcome where, could he be special? Sure. Is he? I'm not going to bet on it. I'll say that. With the Titans, though, I will have them finishing behind the Colts, basically because I think the quarterback situation is the same, but the team is worse.
Yes, much.
I think the Titans' defense has been a disaster for years. I don't really know how much it's actually improved. I don't like the offensive line all that much. I mean, I think Callahan's going to fix that. I do like that Bill Callahan's coming with Brian. Bill Callahan's been one of the best offensive line coaches in football for like 30 years now. So I do like that. But for this season, I'm not a big believer in this team. I don't know if they're the worst team in the NFL. I'm not ready to say that. But I think this team is going to be I see 5 to 7 wins. I think kind of like last year. I would say like they're going to be behind Indianapolis by like 2 games is probably where I put them. So 5-7 wins. Yeah.
So I think now I don't know if they'll end up being the worst team in the league, but on my game by game predictions, I don't see a lot of wins for them. They actually do have for who they are, they have a pretty difficult schedule. And of course, we talk about you're still looking up at the Texans and Jacksonville. That's 4 automatic losses, if we're probably being honest. And the Colts, as we said, are and I know anything can happen in the NFL.
Yeah.
Any given Sunday, as the old saying goes.
The one caveat, but I think this is a Vrabel thing. It's like when they beat teams like Jacksonville or Houston last year, it's because I think Vrabel got them up to play at that level. I don't know if that's going to happen with this new guy.
The Vrabel teams that won the division 2 years in a row, they were always playing out of their skin. Like that team that was the 1 seed in the AFC in 2021. They by DVOA, they were the 13th best team in football, and they were the top seed in the AFC. DVOA doesn't measure your coach, but your record versus DVOA. I know a lot of times you might say that's luck, but luck is your coach putting you in good positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't have that anymore. I think Brian Callahan might be a fine coach. But the Bengals' rise to power was actually almost under Zach Taylor. And I know it was almost kind of weird because he had been there for a few years before things started going right for them. And nobody got poached from his staff in all those years. They were, even after they started winning. And wait, did they lose a defensive coordinator to somebody to be head coach? Maybe they did. I can't remember. But that tells you that. And Zach Taylor might be a pretty decent coach by now. Maybe he learned the game a little bit better as a head coach, but his staff wasn't very highly thought of. And in other words, I don't think. I know they made 2 deep runs in the playoffs, but teams are signing head coaches much later now than they were. Teams wanted to get like their head coach signed by the divisional round. Now teams like waiting to like the week before the Super Bowl to sign their head coach.
Yeah.
So, timing of teams getting knocked out of the playoffs, I don't think that's a real thing anymore because these teams agree to deals, handshake deals under the table before, a team is knocked out of the playoffs at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't see it at all with the Titans. Just their first 4 games are going to be pretty difficult. They're in Chicago week 1. They come home to play the Jets. The Jets are going to be probably really pissed off after losing in San Francisco. Then they play Green Bay, and then they're at Miami. Now, I know they beat Miami on Monday night last year, but sure, Miami in September or October, whenever that game is, that's when they're really good.
That's one of the things when the schedule comes out, you want Aaron Rodgers early in the season.
They are going to get him early in the season. So maybe they do sneak a win there.
But you don't want the Dolphins early in the season. You want them in December. So I think I think this team, the way I would try and look at them is kind of see what you have in Levis and then go from there. And I think if Levis shows enough ability and has a promising season and they maybe perform over expectations, let's say they win 7-8 games, still miss the playoffs probably, but the reason they lose is because the defense let them down in key moments or something like that.
Yeah.
Then they can build on that. So I think that's probably the approach I would look at for the Titans. I do not see under very many circumstances. I won't say any, but I don't see very many situations or circumstances where this team is vying for a playoff spot. I just do not see that at all. But I think finishing up the AFC South. So I think are we in agreement on the order?
I think it's the first time, that we would rank them all the same way.
Yeah, so we have the Houston Texans as the favorites. We both agree that they should win the division.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's maybe a wild card type team. Second, the Colts third, which I feel like the Colts are always third, and then the Titans are fourth. So that's kind of how we have the AFC South kind of shaken out. But we will be right back. We will have another episode on another video here on the channel. We're going to go break down the NFC South here. Stay tuned.